CTV News political analyst Scott Reid, who's standing by in downtown Toronto. What do you think about the optics of this, Scott?
Well, they're not good. But you know, Todd, are you like me? When you were in public school, did you ever play this game head and gut?
No. What is head and gut?
Head and gut is, you're going to take a punch. So do you want the punch in the head or the gut? I think the Liberals today said we'll take the gut. And I think that means that they're betting that taking this punch today of being called every name, saying it's a cover-up, saying it's a cynical move, they'd rather take that punch than the punch to the head that would come with testimony from Jody Wilson-Raybould. That's my guess. I guess we'll see next Tuesday whether they're willing to permit her to testify. But I'm assuming, based on today's actions, that this is all about not having her testify. And I think they're just making a cold, hard-nosed political decision that the pain of today's decision is worth it to avoid the pain of that spectacle.
Right. So you say cold, hard-nosed political decision, but by putting it next Tuesday, and by the way, it's not going to be broadcast before the cameras, so it's in camera, behind closed doors, and Tuesday's budget day as well. So what about that?
Well, frankly, that meeting's not that interesting. The only thing that we're concerned about is we don't really need to watch that meeting. They're going to have a vote. The question that's interesting is she going to be allowed to come back to committee? And the fact that they punted this thing today certainly doesn't lead you to believe that that's the automatic outcome. I assume they're going to meet in camera next week, and she won't. Now, maybe she will. Maybe we'll be proven wrong. Maybe they were just saying, let's test the waters. Let's see how hard the reaction is to this. But my guess is they've decided, you know what, this thing feels like it's cooling. We're going to take some hits, and we're going to receive some allegations of being cynical, and we're willing to trade that off for the avoidance of further testimony, further wall-to-wall coverage, further front-page news on this matter.
Right. So let me ask you about that too. This idea, certainly the Liberals would be hopeful that it's cooling off, so to speak. The House has not been sitting for the last little while as well. Now you have this story. The larger story, of course, began about 5 weeks ago now. Is that your sense that people are moving on?
I'm not certain. I don't know how engaged the people were. Like your Aunt Doris and my Aunt Marg, I don't know how into the story they ever were. I think they know there's a kerfuffle. I think that it's obviously had brand damage for the Liberals and for Justin Trudeau, or we wouldn't be seeing the polls the way they are. But, were they ever super engaged? I'm not so sure. I think that the Liberals are making the calculation that it's a break week. We've not seen the ability for this to sustain itself as a news story. We're going to place all the pressure on the opposition, essentially saying opposition or fate. One of you is going to have to make this an ongoing issue and prove that you can make it an issue that extracts pain from us, not just next Tuesday, but the week after that and the week after that. I think it's a very, I think, people will call it cynical. Other people may call it shrewd, whatever you want to look at. But this is an absolute political calculation. It's a cold, hard political calculation of cost and benefit.
And what did you make of the non-apology, Scott, from the Prime Minister on this? I mean, the buck does stop with him. Jody Wilson-Raybould basically said that he directly said to her, look, I'm an MP from Montreal. This is an issue. We need to find a solution. And he had an opportunity last week to be contrite about it, but he didn't really take a lot of blame, didn't apologize, sort of said, that there was a breakdown in communication of sorts and perhaps I needed to listen more, this kind of talk. But there was no, I'm sorry that we're here.
Yeah, and we talked about this last week. My fundamental read of that is the Prime Minister didn't want to try to reset this issue. I mean, the reason to call the National Gallery together and to say, I've come off the road, I'm taking a day and a half to think this thing through, and then I'm going to declare myself, was to tell us which way he's going. And what he told us in terms of which way he's going was sticking with the path he was on. I mean, fundamentally, that's what he said. Fundamentally, he said, look, I recognize and I acknowledge that I didn't get this thing right in every single way, and I'm going to take some lessons from this. But it was not a full-throated apology. It was not an act of contrition. It was not an acknowledgement that I'm going to have to reset this thing and go right back to code on it. He did not do that. And so I think that was your signal last week that this is the path they've chosen. They've decided they're going to square their shoulders, fight this thing head on, and they're going to, as I said earlier, they're going to fundamentally challenge the opposition. In political speak, what they're really saying is, hey, conservatives, New Democrats, prove to me that you can make this an issue that lingers and lasts and that will actually be hanging around us come next October's election. I think they're taking a hard-nosed bet that it won't and that they and the opposition can't do that.
The Liberals shutting down the Justice Committee today, adjourning it pretty abruptly after it went into session. Scott Reid with his take on that move and the political calculations involved. Thanks for this, Scott, as always.
Thanks, Todd.